I am the Keymaster.
I am the gatekeeper.
Back off, man. I'm a scientist.
Why worry? Each of us is wearing an unlicensed nuclear accelerator on his back.
You're not seeing what you don't want to see. Puppeteers.
Puppeteers?
Pop-Tarts? Did you say you have Pop-Tarts?
I am never gonna see a merman. Ever.
Hello listeners, welcome to Journey Through Sci-Fi, where we journey through the many subgenres of science fiction on screen. I'm Matt.
And I'm James, and in this series we're exploring the sci-fi subgenre of mad science. And in today's episode we'll be looking at Ghostbusters from 1984 and The Cabin in the Woods from 2012.
Yeah, we've got some supernatural horror mad scientists with jobs in crazy supernatural fields dealing with ghosts, ghoulies, monsters and all sorts of other things.
Yeah, it's kind of how science and the supernatural intersect, and it reminded me a little bit of when we did our space opera series and we looked at how fantasy and space opera intersected a bit, and obviously sci-fi and horror always intersecting. They're both very good friends in the genre world, and this is another great example of the two kind of mingling, but also with comedy. So we've got like our sort of like third magic genre in the mix.
Yeah, big comedy in both of these. Iconic comedy in the case of the first film, a beloved franchise now, but beloved couple of films in my youth. And a great cartoon series as well. Do you remember the cartoon series? I'm jumping ahead, James. We need to get into Ghostbusters
quickly. Yeah, he's got too much to say. We need to get into it immediately. Okay, let's take a little pause, take a breath, Matt, compose ourselves. Okay, let's talk about Ghostbusters.
Are you troubled by strange noises in the middle of the night?
Do you experience feelings of dread in your basement or attic?
Have you or any of your family ever seen a spook, specter, or ghost?
If the answer is yes, then don't wait another minute. Pick up your phone and call the professionals. Go Ghostbusters! Our courteous and efficient staff is on call 24 hours a day to serve all your supernatural elimination needs.
We're ready to believe you!
No, I love Ghostbusters. I do want to quickly talk about the cartoon series because I saw both films countless times when I was a kid, but it would have been the cartoon series that was with me the most. Did you watch the real Ghostbusters?
So you said the real Ghostbusters. This is...
I just called it Ghostbusters
well,
when I was a kid.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big point though, isn't it? Because of all of the rights that were involved in this. But we'll get into that. First off, yes, I did watch the real Ghostbusters. It was great. I had all the toys. I had the big Ghostbuster fire station, had the car...
I had a backpack with
the proton
with
pack
gun attached. Yeah,
made the little sounds that when you did it. I got a lot of these from car boot sales. So they'd be missing the labels and things like that. Yeah. But I mean, I think the proton pack, did it have like a thing to make a stream at the front of it?
Mine had a piece of yellow foam that just sat in the end of the gun or whatever you want to call it, and that was supposed to represent the string.
I love it. It's so good.
Yeah.
And did you have the thing that captures the ghosts? You press a button, it opens up.
I didn't have that. That would have been cool. Yeah, the trap.
Yeah, the trap. It was so good. But my favorite thing was the firehouse, because you could buy slime. You could buy actual Ghostbusters slime, and at the top of the Ghostbusters house, you could pour the slime in, and it would come down the vents, and it would like slime your like figures when you put it in. It was great. I had so much fun with that. I mean,
who's cleaning that up when little James is playing with that?
I mean, definitely my parents.
Yeah, I think this is why I didn't have slime stuff, because my parents were like, well, we're not cleaning that up. And don't get him slime.
If you didn't put it back inside the little tub, it would dry out and it would become like this weird sort of layer of just plastic. And who knows what the hell's in that stuff when they make it. But but again, kids love slime. They're still obsessed with slime today. It's a big thing for kids.
Yeah. You know who needs to look into that? The EPA.
The EPA.
Yeah,
definitely. Get them on the case. They need to sort it out. Environmental health, you know.
I haven't kept up with this franchise though. It's been revitalized in the last 10 years or so. 3 new movies, I think. I haven't seen any of them. Have you kept up with the Ghostbusters franchise?
Yeah, I think it's... So they had the Ghostbusters kind of reboot with the all-female cast of Ghostbusters.
Lady Ghostbusters.
Yeah, the Lady Ghostbusters, which didn't do great like commercially.
Retroactively retitled Ghostbusters Answer the Call, I think. It definitely wasn't called that when it hit cinemas, but now, like on streaming platforms and stuff, I think it is called that.
Yeah, probably just to give it some sort of differentiation from the other ones.
Yeah.
And then they've released Afterlife and The Frozen Empire, which are the two latest ones, where they've kind of tried to continue on from the franchise. They've got some of the old Ghostbusters returning in different roles. Harold Ramis's character of Egon, his family, and it's following them. And yeah, there's lots of cameos and things like that, and links into this. But this is the first Ghostbusters. And a minute ago, when you talked about the animated show, did you know about all of the controversy with the name of Ghostbusters, first off, before we get into the film itself?
Only in recent years that there's some genuinely dreadful looking cartoon from like the late 70s called Ghost Space Busters, 2 words, Ghostbusters, I think. And they only made like 15 episodes or something of some... It's not Hanna-Barbera, but it looks like, you know, really cheap Hanna-Barbera stuff.
Yeah.
And they weren't happy. You know, rightly so. I'm not, you know, I'm trying to like minimize their contribution or whatever by slagging it off, and I haven't even seen it. But, you know, rightly so. They used the name first. They had a claim to it. You know, that's how copyright works. Fair enough. So they called the TV show The Real Ghostbusters. But then there was, I mean, that just confused me, because then it was like, is this supposed to be a separate set of characters? Because they look totally different as well. Like Egon's blonde in the cartoon. I was very confused about that when I was a kid.
Yeah, so what it was there was a company called Filmation, who also incidentally did He-Man.
Okay. No amateurs.
Yeah, they knew what they were doing. So they created the Ghostbusters initially, and it was a group of paranormal detectives. One of them's a monkey or a gorilla, I think. I mean, we've all seen the pictures of what they looked like. I don't know too much about that particular animated show, but the big thing was Filmation owned the rights to the name, and Columbia wanted to use the name for this film, and they wanted to call it the Ghostbusters. It did have another title at one point. It was going to be a sequel, well, a kind of like sequel reboot. They were going to use the name Ghostbreakers. So the Ghostbreakers was a comedy horror film in the 1940s. And the idea was to kind of like use that because they owned the rights to that name and just call it the Ghostbreakers. And then that was a way of getting around it. So when they were shooting Ghostbusters, they initially started off with having scenes where they had Ghostbreakers and they had to change the lines just in case they couldn't get rights to the name the Ghostbusters. So they were in lots of sort of like talks about this. It lasted for the entire production of the film, this sort of back and forth thing as to whether or not they'd get the rights. The production team in the end just went, right, we're just going to call it Ghostbusters. It's too expensive to have all of these like 400 extras chanting Ghostbreakers and then repeating it and getting them to chant Ghostbusters. Like, we can't do it. So luckily, what had happened, I think the head of Columbia Pictures, who had really backed this, ended up leaving Columbia. And he was like, okay, like, first off, he was trying to get this film made. He was trying to do everything he could to make sure this would happen. But when he left Columbia Pictures, he'd written something in the contract for the Ghostbusters film saying, okay, the creative team have full rights to this. It can't get shut down. Because another interesting mad thing about this was Columbia Pictures was owned by Coke. So the Coca-Cola company owned Columbia Pictures. And they were very much like, oh, I don't know about this film. I don't know if we can get this made. It's not going to be worth a lot of money to us. So this guy who was running Columbia Pictures, he was the head of Columbia Pictures, said, okay, I'm going to write this in there so Coke can't shelf this film. He had a lot of faith in it. He had a lot of faith in Dan Aykroyd. He had a lot of faith in Ivan Reitman, the whole team. And what happened next was the guy who was running Columbia Pictures ended up going to Universal. And a very funny thing happened. Universal happened to own Filmation. So after all of that back and forthing about the Ghostbusters title, suddenly he becomes the head of Universal, and just goes, sure, you can use the Ghostbusters name for this picture I was trying to get made over at the last company. I was just, when I heard about that story, it's such a convoluted way of getting to what we know now. And obviously the success of Ghostbusters, but the history of the production of this film is really interesting.
And then, so how do we end up at the real Ghostbusters on TV?
I think that was because because you're basically making exactly the same thing as the animated show. And because the animated show of the Ghostbusters at Filmation already existed, they had to have a differentiation. So it's the real Ghostbusters as opposed to the Ghostbusters.
Fair enough.
Wow. Well, I mean, that's all just before this film's even made, but it was made. It's great. We clearly have a lot of love for it.
Yeah.
How do you feel it fits into the world of science fiction and mad science?
Well, we've got 3 scientists as the core Ghostbusters, and then we recruit Winston Zeddemore later, who's not a scientist by trade. He's a professional Ghostbuster by trade. From what we know, we don't know much more about his background. But yeah, we got Ray, Venkman, and Egon, who are scientists, career scientists. In Venkman's case, literally never done anything other than work in academia in science, parapsychology and psychology. That's what Venkman's PhDs are in, and I guess like Ray and Egon
PhDs in inverted commas.
Yeah, and they get kind of drummed out of university for essentially not being serious enough scientists, dossing off. And I mean, to be fair, we do see Venkman doing real psychology experiments at the start of the film, and he is a sleazy jerk and is not taking his science seriously. He's not a good scientist. He's right to be drummed out of the university. But at the same time, it's set in a world where ghosts and supernatural beings are real. So their scientific approach is valid. You know, they are real scientists investigating a real scientific phenomenon in the universe of the film Ghostbusters, right? They do have a legitimate kind of scientific approach, I guess.
And I think when I started watching this again for the podcast, I forgot how much of the science it begins with. The university science that they're doing, they've got university students there. It reminded me of Altered States, which we covered recently on the pod.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Because it's the same kind of thing. You've got these college professors who are doing these scientific experiments, and they're getting their class involved, and they're being funded for it. And that's exactly the premise of Ghostbusters. I mean, as a kid, you're not looking at that kind of element of it, but they do start off, like you say, as scientists, as career scientists, and then suddenly it has this kind of intersection with the supernatural world, and they kind of stumble onto this. And by doing that, it kind of becomes a money spinning idea for them, because they're down and out as well, aren't they? They're career scientists, but they haven't really got much of a career at the moment.
Yeah, it made me wonder what would the Ghostbusters look like if they hadn't been drummed out of the university, because they only form the business Ghostbusters because they get kicked out, which, you know, that Altered States comparison is really interesting. You know, is it the character Mason, the ones who's a bit, he's got like a southern accent in Altered States, and I was like, God damn it, you crazy bastard. You know, what if he had done the sensible thing like the dean at the start of Ghostbusters and just been like, you need to leave the university, you're an incompetent maniac. But what would it look like for the Ghostbusters? Would they go down the Altered States route and just sort of would they become like Gozer at the end of the film, just getting too into it and just going down that route, if they didn't have to form this business just to live, basically? Yeah,
because that's the other thing as well, which is something we have again come across in our Mad Science series, this kind of commercialization of science and selling the idea of science. So these are the only people in all of New York, and potentially the world from the sounds of it, that know how to deal with these supernatural occurrences and how to literally capture a ghost and cage it. And they know the research, they know what they're doing. And it's that kind of idea of the science fiction part of it that I think always washed over me before.
Yeah, we're kind of attuned to it, watching it back. They call it, they think it could be the leading defense science of the next decade or something. That's what when they're like talking about starting the business and stuff. So yeah, that commercialization of it, and it is commercialization of the science, but there's something quite also mundane and blue collar about their application of their scientific discoveries to work, because they are forced into this. It's not quite... I think they do sell it in that kind of like, oh, you know, we could be the leading defense science or whatever, but also they're saying that to comfort Ray, who's just remortgaged his family home to pay for all of this. So that's a bit of spin, you know, to cheer Ray up. Whereas there's something very blue collar. They get this gross old fire station that's falling apart, and the ectomobile?
Yep. Which is
the
a
car they
hearse.
get, which is a hearse that needs a ton of work done on it. It's just a big piece of shit. So yeah, there's something very blue collar, and it makes them, you know, the underdog in all of this. So they're mad scientists who are forced into this kind of rinky-dink business model just to survive.
Because it's a mad idea, isn't it? Everybody thinks that they're trying to trick them. It's some sort of hoax. They're not real scientists in the first place. They were thrown out of the university. They are doing these... They're basically turning into salesmen, aren't they? They've got that entire advert, which is so good and so funny. The little infomercial that they're doing with like, call this number. Have you seen a ghost? It's so good. But it's exactly the kind of thing that was happening at the time. And it's the kind of stuff that they were spoofing on SNL anyway, because a lot of these, well, most of the actors in this have come out of SNL and stuff like Second City and sort of an improv sketch comedy kind of world. And I think them kind of having that connection to what makes everyday people laugh in these shows, and how do you reflect that in this, and the real sort of grounding that this film has in the real world, as much as it's crazy ghosts and all this kind of stuff. It's those things that make you laugh as well. The fact that they're kind of, like, say, rinky-dink and grassroots of sort of the science that they're doing.
And not to get too grandiose, but I do think this film like speaks to the American dream, right? This is three people who have a genuine passion about something, take on business loans to start a business in that field, and are embraced by the city to deliver that service and become local celebrities. And setting in New York, like, so quintessentially American. They're going to up it a gear in the sequel by getting the Statue of Liberty involved. But, you know, even just here, the way of starting your own business, you know, running these ads, really cheesy ads, but people get on board with it due to, you know, market factors in this case. And then you're able to spin that into a successful business and you become local heroes. Is that not the American dream?
And what are they getting? They're getting like 4K a ghost that they bust. Something like that.
Something like that. Yeah. A few $1,000s for Slimer, which, 1984 money. I think that's pretty good money. I think I did Google it, because doesn't Winston make a comment about this isn't worth $11,500 a year, which I assume means the salary is $11,500. I think I looked it up, and that'd be something like $35,000 in today's money, you know, on an inflation calculator. So just a point of reference there for what they're paying Winston, if that's of interest, getting the economics involved if we're talking what they charge for Slimer.
Yeah.
But that Slimer scene's amazing, isn't it? Because that's like their first piece of real business. And it, you know, it's a great sci-fi action sequence, great comedy in that sequence, but also just in terms of how their business works. They're not good at busting ghosts. They are talking about having unregulated nuclear reactors on their backs that they have never used, and they don't really know how they work. They certainly don't explain on screen how they work. And they destroy half a hotel to capture Slimer, who, you know, is the iconic mascot of the entire franchise. Yeah. So retroactively, we know Slimer's incredibly harmless. And even in the film, he just wants to eat and occasionally slime people. So perhaps not necessary to destroy the entire ballroom of this fancy hotel to capture him.
And did you hear about like who they based Slimer on?
I know that he's called Onion Head in the script.
Is he?
That's what they call him in the script, and then obviously immediately becomes Slimer on release because he's not named in the film and he slimes people. Yeah. But does that connect to who he might be based on?
So he's based. Well, basically, what happened?
Oh, hang on. Let me guess. Richard Nixon?
No, that's an interesting one though.
Well, he sort of looks like Nixon, jowly.
Maybe a little bit. So basically, Dan Aykroyd, when he originally conceived of the film, it was going to be him, it was going to be Eddie Murphy, and it was going to be John Belushi.
Right.
And John Belushi had sadly passed away by the time they started making this.
Yeah.
But the team were like, can you make Slimer look like John Belushi?
Wow,
and
okay.
There's an interview with the guy who created this, like the character of Slimer. And he said he worked overnight to try and do this. And they sort of gave him this note last minute. And he was like, well, I don't know quite how to do this. So... like, obviously, John Belushi was in stuff like Animal House, and he's got that iconic scene. Yeah, Blues Brothers, amazing comedy actor.
Yeah.
And this like guy creating this puppet was like, well, how do I do this? He was like, okay, I'm just gonna tell him I've done it. So he told them, look, I've made it like John Belushi. Hadn't really put that much into doing it. And everyone was like, oh, it's great. It looks just like him. Completely just being like, oh yeah, you've done it perfectly. It's exactly how he looked. And the guy was just like, I didn't really do much to make him look like John Belushi, but it's now become this infamous thing that he's kind of their homage to Belushi in this.
Okay, well, fair enough. That's sort of nice. Weird way to honor your dead friend in the film. But I guess they're all comedy friends, aren't they? So. I'm sure he would have appreciated it.
But the special effects for this as well, they're great, aren't they?
They're amazing.
Like how they put this all together. How do you think that kind of holds up in the film when you're watching it now?
I still think it looks amazing. It's like Slimer is probably the best sort of special effects sequence. I love a floating puppet that's also sort of transparent, and the interactions with the characters are great. He doesn't actually interact that much with human beings. We don't even see him slime Venkman, do we? That actually, it cuts right before it happens, and then we catch up with Peter, and he's covered in slime. But that's just great. That's just good direction and editing, isn't it? And I think that, the puppet... I keep saying puppet. I assume they're puppets, right? Well, it can't be anything else. Yeah. Puppets and models. Yeah. And then shot to make them look transparent enough that they feel ghostly. Yeah, it's great. I mean, what other ghosts do we have? We obviously have Zool and whatever Lewis turns into, the two kind of dog monsters.
The gatekeeper and the
keymaster. Yeah. And then how many more ghosts actually are in this film? Because there's not loads. There's a montage where there seems to be loads.
Yeah, you see lots of quick ones.
Yeah. But there's not many more featured ghosts, are there?
Not overly featured. They've got the, like, say, the Marshmallow Man, all of that kind of stuff in there. They've got the ghost in the library at the start.
Oh yes, she's very good as well.
Yeah, I think they've got quite a few in there, but it's not like every 5 seconds you see a new ghost.
Yeah,
it's all in that montage. But this is like, they must have taken so much time to do this, but they only had 4 months or something, I read, because they had to rush it through for summer because they wanted it to be a summer release.
Okay,
so the special effects team had to work overtime. And also, when they were making this, they wanted to get Industrial Light and Magic to do the special effects, but they were all tied up with Temple of Doom. So what happened was a couple of the guys who worked at ILM were like, oh, we're thinking about leaving anyway and starting our own business and going to LA. And they kind of heard about Ghostbusters, went off, said, hey guys, if you chuck us some money to get our business started, we'll do your special effects. And they kept just getting more and more people from ILM, like cherry picking their special effects team to do Ghostbusters.
Okay.
And then I think Douglas Trumbull came on board later on. They bought something from his company. Yeah, like Silent Running, 2001.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, so like they made an entire special effects company for this, basically from scratch. It was called Boss Film Studios, and yeah, Columbia and MGM had like jointly funded Richard Edlund, who launched this new company. So again, we got a whole new special effects company from this film. Brilliant.
An ILM spin-off.
Yeah, an ILM spin-off.
Yeah.
Cherry picked.
Brilliant.
But yeah, so good. But yeah, all of those special effects that go into that, I think they do hold up. You've got the real life puppetry. I read somewhere, like, there's this great quote, I can't remember exactly what it is, but Del Toro's talking about this recently. And he said, I want to see these things in real life when I'm making a film. I don't want it to be like digital and CGI'd. I want to see these things. I want there to like smell the sawdust that's been used to make them and that kind of thing. So it's this classic filmmaking, which of course is incredibly hard and incredibly difficult to put together. But this kind of real practicality they put in this film, I think I really enjoy, because it kind of, again, like the world's grounded and so are the special effects. It's all kind of made up in this filmic world. Yeah, I really like that. And I think that helps with just the interactions with the ghosts. Like I said, Slimer, we don't see him slime Venkman, but Slimer has a real physical presence in the scene. So you feel like he would have just slimed Venkman when he went through him. Like you want to feel that. I really like the puppets as well. I like the kind of Ray Harryhausen style puppetry towards the end when Gozer's... No, not Gozer. I keep forgetting the Keymaster is running rampant. Lewis. You talked about the fact that they're kind of like blue-collar American dream scientists in this. Do you think that I think it's an interesting fact that these guys become kind of the superheroes of the 80s. Yeah. And they're scientists, and it's kind of bringing a different idea of what science and a mad scientist is through the 80s, because they're suddenly like superheroes, aren't they? And like we're dressing up like them as kids and doing all this kind of stuff. How do you feel about that part of the film and the legacy of it? It's interesting because there's an element of wanting to celebrate scientists, and this still being in a period of time where scientists could be celebrated culturally and be superhero status. But at the same time, they're not very good scientists, Venkman in particular, I don't know how to view them, I guess, in that context. Venkman is like not a good person and not a good scientist either. It's not aged well, his actions at all. He's a sleazebag. He remains likable because he's Bill Murray, I guess. And Bill Murray is likable. But he doesn't do anything in this film that is likable, you're right? Yeah. Apart from, there's moments where he sort of propels the plot, and there are moments of heroism where he's like, well, I guess we have to go and, fight these ghosts, even though he's a bit cowardly and he tries to send Ray in for stuff like that. But, he is sort of there as a Ghostbuster, but also he's a sleazebag. Ray and Egon, maybe more likable and more legitimate. It's like their scientific qualifications are justified by the events of the film, right? They get drummed out of university because they're wackos, but then New York gets overrun by ghosts, and Gozer is rising up to try and take over the world. So they are wackos, but guess what? The thing they're wacky about is 100% correct, and now they are uniquely qualified experts on a problem that New York is facing. So they're kind of justified through the insane events of the plot, I guess, to become these hero figures. Yes, the insane events of the plot, and also the insane things that they're doing throughout, or saying that they almost did. There's one line that Venkman says to Egon, where he says, "Do you remember the time I had to stop you from drilling a hole in your head?" Yeah. Because you were certain it would do something. And I was like, just like the stuff that they're doing like that. You said they've got a nuclear reactor in their basement and they don't know exactly how it works. On their backs, it's the proton packs. As well, yeah. So it's like all of these things are just, they're really playing with it. But that's kind of what the mad scientist is traditionally in sci-fi. It's this kind of character who is trying to progress the world of science, but is also a bit of an egomaniac. So they just don't know where the line is. And these guys don't really know where the line is either, but they're kind of, because they're so ragtag and likable in the aspect that they're trying to do something and they're funny, and you do sort of get drawn to their characters and the quirkiness of them, that it kind of makes it okay. And it's such an interesting example of mad science sort of being twisted in this way. But also you've got this science element, and then you've kind of got the supernatural stuff. So going back to the supernatural and the kind of mythology around it and the lore, What did you think about those two worlds colliding in this and how they kind of manage that?
Well, I always love when you get these glimpses into what a strange man Dan Aykroyd is. Like he's incredibly lucky that he's funny, right? Because his interests are bonkers. Like he's genuinely really interested in all that. I don't know if Gozer is something he made up based on stuff he's interested in, or it is like something that he's read about and is interested in. But all of that is coming through, that he's incredibly passionate about some weird stuff here. He's got his Crystal Skull vodka line, and that does him incredibly. I think he's made more money off that than he ever made off films. And it's just vodka, like, you know. But it's in a skull because he's fascinated with all the Crystal Skull stuff. And then he's also just really interested in blues music. And it's like, that's not really that much of a commercial interest. But luckily he's really funny, so he can write Blues Brothers and star in that. So he's got an excuse to just sing a load of blues songs because it's a really funny, fun film. So I think he's just really lucky that he's funny on top of all his weird niche interests. He's kind of like living the dream there, that he can pair them all together. But yeah, I guess in this film it's just the case that like Gozer's real in this universe. That's all that really matters, and then it holds up, kind of having scientists investigating Gozer. But it's bonkers for a mainstream film, isn't it? It's such a weird direction it goes in, because I was watching it back and I was thinking, like, I mean, Gozer's not even a ghost, right? Gozer, she is the primary antagonist of the film, and everything is happening because Gozer's like returning to Earth or to our dimension or whatever. But Gozer's not a ghost. Like we've got this whole premise that we've got on board with, that Ray and Egon investigate ghosts and they're proved right and they're able to start a business based on that. And then it's like, also, there's an ancient Sumerian god who wants to take over the world. That's just also happens to be happening at the same time. And luckily our Ghostbusters proton packs, you know, and all of that stuff is also perfectly valid for dealing with Gozer, but it's not what you signed up for. It's actually got nothing to do with the ghosts, I think. You know, it's just another thing that's going on that's weird.
Yeah, it's the big bad of it, isn't it? Like, how can you make the ultimate ghost? We're going to go one step further. It's going to be a god, and throwing all of those kind of elements in together. But I think also just in terms of the scripting and how they put it together, so Reitman, Ramis, and Aykroyd were all there. I think Moranis did some stuff on the screenplay as well, but I'm not sure.
Did he?
But they all sort of had to really rush this script along. Initially, like you said, Dan Aykroyd has some very specific interests. It was like a kind of epic story. It was less grounded. It was going to be set in the future where Ghostbusters are like a dime a dozen, and they're just like plumbers, so they're just everywhere. And all of this stuff, I think, came from his family background as well, because he grew up with his family doing stuff like seances every week, and they would have people...
And listening to blues music.
Yeah, probably. And then there would be people coming through the town and coming in sort of like the local farmhouse, and they'd have these seances, and there'd be people which had like claimed to be like telekinesis, like they could do telekinesis. They were like telepaths. There was all this kind of stuff, and he was raised around all of this stuff and this kind of like spiritualism and these kind of beliefs. I think his great grandfather was really big in that kind of world. He wrote a book on ghosts, which is like it's like a big read in those kind of circles. So all of this kind of stuff, he's got so much stuff to put into this screenplay, but I think people like Ivan Reitman were like, well, we've got to make it work as this film, so you have to ground it. So
have you thought about making it like a movie?
But then they had this idea of like the gatekeeper and the keymaster, and they couldn't quite figure out how to make that work. And I think that all came together because they managed to get Sigourney Weaver involved, and she was like looking at bits of the script, and she was like, okay, I like this gatekeeper thing. And she said, I think maybe my character becomes a dog. And apparently in the interview, she did an impression of a dog and was like, yeah, and I really think this should happen in the film. So that kind of became the thing that linked that aspect of it. So, I mean, all of this is kind of crazy geniuses high in a house trying to make this stuff connect in a very short time period. So things like having an ancient god suddenly in the mix, I think they're just trying to connect the dots of all this stuff. Like even the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, that was just, I mean, that sounds like it's been created by a bunch of stoned people in a writer's workshop.
Yeah, there's quite a few story beats that are quite left field and don't feel... I mean, they're not from like a screenwriter's textbook, are they?
But that's because it's like comedy as well, isn't it? It's improv.
Yes. Yeah.
That's where I think the film really gets into its stride. And the fact it can have all these ridiculous things in, but it works because it's also funny. And that's what really makes it cohesive for me.
It's a slightly weird movie, isn't it? I think, and you know, we talked a bit about the mad science behind the scenes. There's some alchemy going on there, isn't there, in the writing of it, and in the bringing all these disparate ideas together into a cohesive, or not entirely cohesive whole. But the sort of lack of perfect cohesion is part of the charm here, and also probably why it was hard to recreate in the sequel. Now, you know, for the record, I absolutely loved the sequel when I was a kid, and I haven't really watched it as an adult, but I know that it's generally considered to be quite a poor sequel, which that's not my recollection of it. I loved it. It's got the pink glue and the scary painting and the mad art museum curator.
Yeah. So good.
Scarier as well, from what I remember.
Scary painting. That freaked me out.
Is he called Vigo or something? The
Vigo
villain?
the Destroyer or something.
That's
like
it.
that.
Terrifying. But anyway, my point is, I think probably the reason that it's not so beloved, and you know, it's been hard to reboot. It took a couple of goes to reboot. I haven't seen the new one, so I don't know if they've stuck the landing there. But there's some lightning in a bottle there, in that alchemy behind the scenes, that mad science of filmmaking that has maybe not been recaptured since 1984.
Yeah, it was just like a perfect storm of all of these crazy minds meeting together and then putting this on film. And just the fact it managed to get made as well, I think it's not just that. I think it's the fact it got made in the first place. Someone greenlit this as this crazy out there comedy film. And then it went one step further and became this kind of cultural phenomenon that still is referenced today. I mean, you look at things like Stranger Things. In one of the first episodes, they dress as Ghostbusters for Halloween. It's kind of got those... It like Stranger Things is a whole show dedicated to 80s, 90s nostalgia. And Ghostbusters is such a part of that, and the supernatural mixing of all of those things. So I think it's so interesting that it falls into this mad science category, but in a way you wouldn't quite imagine the trope of a mad scientist to go to when we go back to stuff like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and Frankenstein, this kind of weird mishmash of all of those tropes we've seen before coming together in 4 strange scientists busting ghosts.
Yeah, which makes them feel good. Did you notice that there's a second song written for the movie, in the movie?
Yeah.
There's a song about Ghostbusters, which isn't the theme from Ghostbusters. I've never noticed that before. It's like during the montage, there's a whole song that is just written about the Ghostbusters, and you never hear that played outside of the not watching the film.
I clocked that. It's got to be a B-side or something, hasn't it?
Yeah. It's like the B-side to the Ghostbusters
like,
thing.
Quick, chuck this in.
Yeah.
But all in all, sort of the kind of collection of mad scientists that we've got, I think Winston is an interesting character out of that as well, because like you said, he's the outsider in that. He's looking in and being like, well, this is mad. I should be getting paid more for this. And what you guys are doing is absolutely crazy. But then by the end of it, he's like, I love my job.
Yeah.
But I think he's quite a good... I think he would have been a better sort of audience surrogate if he'd been in there earlier.
Yeah, he doesn't come into it early enough, and I don't think they make enough of Winston. I think Ernie Hudson's great.
Yeah.
And he understands the assignment, right? Like he is supposed to be the audience surrogate. He's the blue collar one who just comes in as a Ghostbuster and only exists in the context of the business of the Ghostbusters. He's not really a mad scientist. He's sort of the sanest one.
Yeah.
And he's got that critical distance from Venkman, Stantz, and Spengler, and he's like, yeah, you guys are weird, but what does he say? I'll believe whatever you're paying. I'll believe whatever you say if it pays a salary.
Exactly. He's just all about the bottom line of things, which I think is great.
Again, kind of an American dream thing, though, isn't it? Like, hey, I'm on board as long as there's a salary. I'll work for you, and no more. Basically, that is a big part of the kind of economic side of things to this. Have you seen Ernie Hudson recently?
Oh yeah, he is jacked.
He looks incredible. He's like 80 years old, and I saw a picture from 2024. His Wikipedia profile page is from last year. It looks incredible.
Yeah, he makes an appearance in one of the new films. So yeah, he's clearly been looking after himself as old Ernie. But so you've got Ernie in there, but you've also got like other people in this kind of ensemble cast. Like we talked about Rick Moranis a little bit, playing Tully.
Always funny.
Always great. And him sort of like being in this and being this kind of quirky neighbor who's pretty annoying, but is always just kind of bumbling around. He's brilliant. And then you've got the secretary, played by Annie Potts, Janine. So
I love Janine.
She's great. And she's
in the sequel more, isn't she?
Yeah, she becomes more of a character, doesn't she? But in this initial one, she's just like, I'm just answering the phones and I shouldn't be having to do all of this, and keeps trying to sort of like get with Egon. All of those little bits, again, just like little subtle comedy moments. But yeah, she's a great character in it.
Weirdly broke my heart a little bit watching it this time and just seeing Egon fumble Janine throughout. She's basically throwing herself at him, and he's just, I don't know, Sheldon Coopering his way through life. Like, it just kind of broke my heart because they'd make such a nice couple.
Yeah, he's just like, he's more interested in his ghosts and putting drills in his head.
Spores and funguses.
Oh yeah, that was the line, wasn't it? But I think all in all, the way they view science in this is quite optimistic, would you say? Like the way that they're using it, it's not like the other mad science films we've looked at where it's this terrible thing to be like worried about. This is something that saves the day in the end.
Yeah, and also it specifically kind of celebrates a kind of unregulated mad science, which is the worst kind of mad science that we've seen throughout this series. But, apart from Gozer, the other big villain is slimy William Atherton, who's this and Die Hard, two
Dickless.
Iconic slimy. Yeah, this man is dickless. And the man who gets punched by John McClane's wife in Die Hard 1 or 2 in one of them. He's brilliant, but he's also representing literally the regulatory authority that is supposed to like look after the environment in America. And he's just seen as this asshole who's going to get in their way and is a dickless moron.
Yeah, he's stopping them from having all the fun with their unregulated nuclear reactor backpacks.
Yeah, so that's the kind of mad science that is specifically celebrated. Unregulated, zany, wacky guys.
Just what everybody in the world wants to be doing. Playing around with science and making weird ghost-busting tools.
Mm.
The other thing as well, like you mentioned Gozer again then, I just remembered. So do you know who Gozer almost was played by?
Let me have a guess.
You'll never get this one.
Is it Grace Jones? There's something about the outfit and the hairstyle of Gozer at the end that made me think of Grace Jones.
She would have been really good. Yeah. No, it wasn't Grace Jones. Do you want to have one more guess, or are you out?
Richard Nixon.
Richard Nixon again. There's no connection to Richard Nixon as far as I'm aware. So it was actually at one point in the scripts, Gozer was going to be played by Pee Wee Herman.
Oh.
That's exactly the response. Yeah.
Interesting.
Pee Wee Herman as Gozer
Pee Wee
the
Herman,
Destroyer.
the character, or Pee Wee Herman, Paul Rubens, the actor? Because Paul Rubens is a good actor, and I could see a version of Gozer played by Paul Rubens, but a Pee Wee Herman style Gozer is a different proposition entirely.
I think based on the fact they were all stoned writing this script, it would have been Pee Wee Herman, the character.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? So like Gozer turns up, it's Pee Wee Herman. Next second, there's a giant Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. That would have just, I think that would have been a little bit too much for the end.
I don't know. There's an internal logic to that.
Makes sense.
That kind of holds together.
How did I just say that makes sense? This is mad. That it actually does.
That's the alchemy of the film, though, is going from Pee Wee Herman to Grace Jones to the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, and it all feeling somewhat coherent.
Yeah, and it's this perfect combination, like we said at the start, of sci-fi, horror, the supernatural, and comedy. And it's linked all of that stuff together so well, and it has gone on to influence lots of other comedies which use these genres together. And I think it influences the next film a fair bit as well.
Okay, let's move on to Drew Goddard's Cabin in the Woods from 2012. Hi listeners, hope you're enjoying the show. If you want to support us and get access to hundreds of hours of bonus episodes, you can sign up to our Patreon.
We've got discussions on all the latest sci-fi films in cinemas, the Bad Movie Bunker, and Patrons' Picks, as well as mini-series covering your favourite franchises.
Patrons get to have their say on what we cover, both over on Patreon and right here on the main show too.
So if you want to join, head over to patreon.com/Journey Through Sci-Fi.
Now, back to the episode.
Do they know about this downstairs?
The director doesn't care about this stuff. As long as everything goes smoothly upstairs, as long as the kids do as they're told.
But then it's fixed.
No.
Well, how can you wager on this when you control the outcome?
Well, we just get them in the cellar. They take it from there.
No, they have to make the choice of their own free will. Otherwise, the system doesn't work. It's like the Harbinger. It's this creepy old fuck. Practically wears a sign, "You will die." Why do we put him there? The system. They have to choose to ignore him, and they have to choose what happens in the cellar. Yeah, we rig the game as much as we need to, but in the end, they don't transgress.
They can't be punished.
When did you first watch this film?
Oh, I'm fairly sure I would have gone to the cinema to see this. This was big for our friendship group. I feel like this landed for people like us.
This was prime. Anybody who had watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer growing up had enjoyed Serenity, Firefly, all of those kind of things. I think when this came out, there were rumors of it coming out for a long time, because again, tricky production schedule with this one. I remember just seeing all the news reports. It's going to come out at some point. It's going to come out. They shot it back in 2009, but didn't make its way to cinemas until 2012. And it was sort of pushed back, and then MGM went bankrupt, I believe, around about this time. And then Lionsgate came to the rescue and made sure that this film actually came out. So we almost didn't get this at all. And I mean, it's a low-budget film with a really interesting premise and story. But I think people were worried, like the producers, execs, studio heads, they were obviously worried about it being a commercial success at the same time, because it is a bit of an out there idea, but it's definitely had an audience waiting for it, wanting it to come out. I mean, we were a prime example of that.
Yeah, ridiculously high concept, really, isn't it? But not hard to market, really, I guess. It shouldn't be. I guess it was just marketed. It was kind of just marketed as like a slasher with a twist, is what I remember. Unless you were like us and you were sort of invested in it already and you knew who the creators were behind it. But I feel like the general marketing was kind of just like horror movie with a bit of a twist, and don't say much more than that.
And I think it also benefited from the fact that its cast, like when it first came out, or when it was first being made, the cast were all pretty much unknowns. And then what happens is Chris Hemsworth goes on and becomes Thor for the MCU. He does that comes out in 2011. So suddenly, when they put this out in 2012, Chris Hemsworth is now a name in the zeitgeist. People know him more because he's just played a big Marvel superhero. So I think that kind of contributed it to this as well, sort of having its day and sort of being elevated a little bit more just by that sort of like coincidence. Because if it had come out in 2009, that would have been before that, and then Hemsworth would have been more of an unknown at the time.
Okay, yeah, interesting. I didn't know that. I guess he doesn't look. He's not Avengers sized in the movie.
Yeah, he's not had he's
a very fit man, but
he's not on the Marvel diet and workout routine, is he? At this point,
unquote Marvel diet.
Yeah. So there's those kind of elements that sort of were part of the genesis of this film. But you've got director Drew Goddard co-writing this with Joss Whedon. I think they just locked themselves in a hotel room and then just got this together. I think it's been said they wrote the script in 3 days or something, some people have said, which is like they just like hammered it out again, kind of like Ghostbusters. They just sort of locked themselves away, right, put it all together.
But kind of the opposite of Ghostbusters in terms of scripting in how knowing it is about screenwriting and playing on those tropes, whereas Ghostbusters feels like, okay, what would be like a funny thing to happen next? And when can I get to Gozer the Gozerian? You know, those two forces at work. This is like two people who are very interested in how a film should work and either playing to or against that. You know, that's what's at tension throughout the film, is whether they lean into the tropes or they're playing against the tropes.
But it is that understanding of the tropes that is so fundamental to this, isn't it? Because they have to understand, well, the audience has to understand what it's like to watch these kind of films in order to get the twist of it. And the fact that it is, in fact, like a controlled experiment, and it's all being manufactured, this whole entire scenario by these underground workers that we see throughout the film. But it's all it kind of like ekes out that knowledge to you as it goes. It's all very, like you say, it's constructed. It's been clearly put together with a structure and with a specific way of telling that story in the world of the film, which is very nuanced and clever. But it is all eked out, and it's a love letter to all of those kind of horror and sci-fi tropes that we've come to know and love.
Yeah, creature features and slashers and monster movies. They've got every kind of possible monster that you could possibly imagine in an underground lab ready to be deployed onto some, I was going to say unwitting teens, but the extent to which they are unwitting, I guess, is part of the experiment, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly that. And the fact that they are turned into the stereotypes of a traditional horror slasher by the people running this experiment that is happening. That's a key point in this, because the idea that the jock character isn't really a jock, he's studying sociology, and that the quote-unquote dumb blonde character isn't actually blonde all the time, and she's got hair dye that is seeping into her brain, and I don't know what it's doing to her brain cells.
Making her dumb.
Yeah, making her dumb. But yeah, so all of these things are controlled in this experiment. But the main premise is you've got a bunch of kids going to a cabin in the woods, like so many films we've seen before, and they are there to have a weekend away from school, just them drinking, having fun, diving into freshwater lakes, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, little do they know they are stepping into a mad science experiment, but a very tightly controlled experiment. And that's where there's a sort of link here to Ghostbusters, the mad science of Ghostbusters, in that in both cases it becomes this mundane work. It's every day for the people who are involved in it. You know, I think the film opens with the two main lab technicians talking about their weekend or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, you know, what are you doing on the weekend? A very kind of mundane conversation you have with a colleague as they are heading to, you know, control this experiment to torture and kill some teenagers, basically.
But it's a while before you kind of realize all of that. You know that there's something up. You know that you've got this kind of government agency doing stuff. But like you say, they're very much just like average workers. They're in their office at a vending machine. They're doing what they normally do. And that was something that Drew Goddard was really interested in, because he grew up in Los Alamos, which was where the Manhattan Project was. Wow. It was one of the secret sites for that. So he was really fascinated with this idea that at the time when they were doing that, people would have just been going to their normal 9-to-5 jobs, but actually be working on weapons of mass destruction. So the idea in this is that these people working in this office doing this controlled experiment are still just doing a normal job, but their job also entails stopping the apocalypse from happening in a very roundabout way, with all of this controlled experiment and killing of unassuming teens as well.
That's a fascinating comparison to the Los Alamos Manhattan Project experiments. I wonder what Drew Goddard made of the film Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
That gets into that as well in a obviously very different way.
Definitely. And I really love this kind of flip-flopping between this traditional horror film that you're kind of watching and the kind of meta-ness of it as well, because you've got that, and then you've got the office people and the underground bunker in this government facility watching what's happening and controlling it, like the audience, like the film director. It's all, if you think about it too much, you're like, you're watching it, but then also the director's watching it and they're controlling it, and then da-da-da-da-da. And you get, it's one of those, yeah, I imagine that if the guys working on Ghostbusters, whilst they're getting high, had thought about this film or watched this film, they would have had some sort of enlightened moment where they're like, it's all very meta and it feeds into this and that and that. And if you look into this, like, it does feel like that, but at the same time, it's still very simple, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, well, there's a lot about, again, filmmaking. It's less about, I think it's less on the mad science of filmmaking metaphor that we've referred to a few times, and more a direct kind of reference to how filmmaking works. You've got this hungry audience that desires violence and death lurking beneath the lab, and a hungry audience in cinemas who also want to see that. But that's a big part of the fun, is all of those references and stuff like that, and then they just make a big part of that out of just making a kind of straight up horror film as well,
because it is a horror film but with those kind of sci-fi tinges to it because of the experiment that's going on and this kind of controlled lab that they're working in. But it is balancing these kind of horror archetypes, like the zombies and all of the different possible scenarios you could have done, like you're writing a horror film. Like, it could have been this, it could have been that. And the difference between that, the kind of supernatural elements again, and the almost kind of distanced, cold logic of the people doing the experiment, because they're betting on who's going to get killed first. Well, not really who gets killed first, but what they're going to pick in this basement when they have to go through and pick something which will end up resulting in a creature of some form being raised up to go and kill them. So it's kind of this balance of the two things, again, like the supernatural and this cold scientific lab thing, which is very much more corporate. Those two things are quite interesting juxtapositions in this.
Yeah. Again, similar to Ghostbusters, those things exist in this world. So we have scientists who react to them in a scientific way. It's a little bit more, I don't know, the scientists, as it turns out, simply don't have the control over those supernatural forces that they maybe think they do. Certainly for how relaxed about it and how mundane it all seems for them, that doesn't match up with the level of control that they actually have as we see at the end of the film, compared to Ghostbusters, where it becomes mundane because they're actually just good at their job. You know, until Gozer shows up, the simple ghost busting, they become quite good at it. They get fame and fortune starts to roll their way, and it can become a bit of a mundane thing and a blue collar kind of job to be a Ghostbuster. But here, I don't know, it's like they've fast forwarded to the mundaneness. But even at the start of the film, I think one of the things they say at the start of the film is Sweden has cracked. Don't know what cracked means, but it's clear by the end of the movie that, you know, it's when something disastrous has happened, like it's happened in 5 or 6 other labs. So it's almost a bit cavalier, isn't it, to be so relaxed and treat it like a 9-to-5 government job down in the lab, when it's just you and Japan that haven't gone catastrophically wrong. And then Japan also does.
I suppose they have to deal with it in that way, though, don't they? And it's that idea of the fact they're all interlinked, these different offices and this workplace. It's a big company. And that's the difference between this and Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters, they're kind of freelance entrepreneurs. In this, it's a big corporation that is in charge of regulating all these different experiments that are happening around the world and all of that. But then the experiments aren't just experiments in the normal sense. They're connected to these ancient rituals. So again, like how in Ghostbusters, you've got the Sumerian god. in this you've got like another connection to religion with the, what do they call them in this? These like
ancient gods.
Yeah, again, it's ancient gods.
Used to rule the earth.
All of this kind of connecting back to the mythology and the supernatural fantasy of it. So it's going back and having that connection.
Yeah, I thought we were dealing with a Cthulhu type thing, but then at the end of the movie, it just has like a sort of normal, well, not normal, but a humanoid arm is what comes out at the end of the film. So maybe more, I don't know, Greek, like a Titan or something. It's not that important, I suppose, is it? But yeah, they like you say, it's this huge corporation or intergovernmental, whatever it is. It's big. It's got big infrastructure to it, and that immediately makes them not likable, right? Because they are not an underdog. The Ghostbusters are an underdog. Three guys start a business because they get kicked out of university. That's an underdog story. So we don't like our lab technicians. There's callousness and a presumed sort of sense of authority, and assuming they're safe. I guess they don't realise that they are more stereotypical horror victims than the people that they're setting up to be stereotypical horror victims.
Even the idea of the stereotypes of the horror victims they're setting up. So the guys in the cabin, this idea that these like have been put out into the world because these are specific roles we need in order to do this ritual. So it kind of almost implies as well that popular culture has been manipulated by the fact they need to do this ritual, and they need to have like your jock character, your fool. We need to have all of these different people exist in this kind of storytelling nature in order for them to do this experiment. So it's kind of like they're already setting that up in the wider world.
Or that the ritual is filmmaking itself, and the dark and angry god is, I don't know, the collective consciousness of a film-going audience.
Again, Ramis and everyone would have had an absolute day looking at this film stoned. But they've got all of that kind of stuff going on in this as well. But then at the same time, they're satirizing all of the sort of horror cliches that are in there, and they're making it very overt. How many different horror film tropes and other horror references did you notice when you were watching this? It's a really fun game I like to play when I watch this.
It's a film made for people who want to pause it. Like when I was writing down names watching The Expanse season 6, I didn't do it so much here, but I certainly paused on the whiteboard. I wanted to see what all the things were there, and then I think you can also pause at the end, can't you, and connect to it. I mean, the thing for me, I'm a massive Evil Dead fan, and as soon as you see the cabin, I'm like, that's the cabin from Evil Dead.
Yeah, definitely.
And they go into the basement. It's all like the geography of it feels exactly like the Evil Dead. And then we just got all sorts of references by the end, don't we? I don't know what the merman is. Like, I've never seen a horror movie with mermen in. I'm sure there is one, but it's sort of a big joke in this film. Or maybe the fact that, like, Bradley Whitford's complaining that he's never seen a merman, isn't he? Maybe that's the reference, is the point that there actually aren't many horror films about mermen. But that one's a bit confusing. And I don't know, one of the ones that I really liked was it's basically a Cenobite at the end, isn't it?
Buzzsaw
Hellraiser thing.
Buzzsaw head?
Buzzsaw head, sure. Because he's got the little mystery box that didn't get used in the basement. So I enjoyed that. What other ones are there that are like quite direct movie references?
You've got the ones from... There's The Strangers. There's kind of a reference to that. Like,
the masked killers.
The masked killers.
Come down the lift.
They've got the zombies, obviously. And I love the bit where they're like, well, these are zombies, but then these aren't zombies. They're actually zombie redneck family. So it's a very specific different type. So those ones... I'm trying to think what else. They had like a weird killer robot.
Yes, that was cool. The one with all the like chainsaws on Waldo's like coming out.
They had a killer clown. The killer clown apparently is played by the guy who was doing he was like director of action or something. So he was doing all the choreography for all of the different characters.
I think he might have played the Cenobite as well.
Probably. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. So they've got those. They've got the werewolf, of course, which becomes quite a big character in that last scene. There's so many different things, and I think that's the joy of this. You can watch it and be like, oh yeah, of course, it's interlinked to that. And even when they go down into the basement and they're picking the kind of, I don't know what you would call it, the magical item, the totem, whatever it is.
Yeah, the thing that's going to trigger one of those monsters.
Yeah, it keeps you guessing because you're like, oh, well, this could have been what could have happened, or it could have been this. But they've settled on zombie redneck family. So I think all of that is so fun to watch as a fan of horror and genre cinema and just trying to piece all that together.
And with the J horror film playing out, you know, on a little monitor, and we just get glimpses of it. I love the way it goes disastrously wrong in Japan. Is just a room full of Japanese schoolgirls manage to like placate this evil J horror ghost and trap her spirit in a frog.
It's so good. Again, so knowing of all of the different cliches in it, and like even the moment when you've got the sex scene that's about to happen, the way that they sort of do all of that and the lead up to that, and the way it's so orchestrated, where they turn the heating up in the experiment and they do the moonlighting, all of it's so contrived, but that's how these things play out on screen. They have to be orchestrated in that way in order to sort of like work with the tropes and also create a certain atmosphere for when you're watching it. But the fact you're seeing the science behind it and you're seeing people actually pushing the buttons, it kind of creates this great kind of imagery.
Yeah. So do you think that they have like free will within this experiment that they're creating? Like, what's it saying about free will and manipulation and scientific experimentation?
So do you mean in terms of the characters?
Well, you know, like you're saying, turning up the heat to make it, and they go further than that. They're like spraying them with pheromones to get them all horny, like, and the hair dye to make her stupid, stuff like that. Like, they talk about, you know, they have to choose an item, don't they? But like, what is the degree of free will in this experiment that they're creating?
Well, it's that kind of, well, basically they're making a reality television as well, as much as it is a film. And it's it reminded me of, there's a cooking show in America called Cutthroat Kitchen or something like that. And they'll do all of these things to try and elicit a reaction out of the chefs. They cook for like 24 hours in this big warehouse, and they'll do stuff like they will say, you've got to make something out of one ingredient, and then they haven't got that particular ingredient, they have to use something else, and they'll turn off the gas so they can't cook at that time. So it's kind of like,
why?
It's just to make good TV and put these people in really panicked states and see how they...
To satisfy the dark and angry god.
Yeah, exactly. So it just kept making me think of that and being like, oh, we actually do this kind of stuff day to day in TV anyway. And I'm sure they do that kind of stuff. I worked on like entertainment TV for a while, and I've heard stories about like how they contrived the scripts in Love Island and how they did it in like Made in Chelsea and all that kind of stuff. So it's that kind of, I think the office workers do have some autonomy in terms of how they do these things, and they've got certain methods that work, like when they do the pheromones, like when they spray Chris Hemsworth with something to completely change his mind and make sure that they all go off in different directions. So they know the tricks of the trade to try and manipulate the people. But I do think the people in the cabin do have their own, like, they've still got their free will, but every trick is being used by the scientists to try and get the reaction they want. And again, that's the experiment element of it, isn't it? They want a certain outcome. They can't guarantee that outcome, but they can do everything to try and make that happen in order for the experiment to run how they want and to get the result that they need at the end of it.
Yeah. They're sort of, they make a case that they are actually dependent on the free will of the subjects, but they're doing literally everything they can to, I don't know if subvert the free will, but, you know, try and control it a little bit.
In the end, they can't anyway, because you get Fran Kranz's character, Marty, who is obviously very intelligent. He's a fool, but he also can figure out what's going on, because all of these characters are like the university students, but they're highly intelligent. They know kind of like how to get out of these kind of situations. They know that they're playing into the stereotypes. The fact that Marty can see this happening, but he's just too stoned to quite put it all together, I think that's a really fun element of it.
And he thinks, when he does put it together, he thinks he's on a reality TV
show.
Yeah,
exactly, as you would. Because
well,
that's what they're doing. They're doing the same
Reasonable.
thing.
Yeah.
Apparently, Fran Kranz, so in the trivia on IMDb, it says something like Fran Kranz was made to wear baggy clothes and not jump into the swimming scene because he was too buff, and he made Chris Hemsworth look less buff. So they had to like make sure he looked like a stoner and to give him all the baggy clothes.
Okay. I mean, he's very convincing as a stoner guy.
Exactly. He did a good job of it. But what did you think about the other characters in the cabin, like the other people that make up this kind of ensemble?
I like the way they are constantly. You can see that they are being nudged into the stereotype, but it's not necessarily fitting. They make a point of talking about in one of the very first scenes that Dana has had a relationship with someone, basically. Like, so we know that she's not a virgin from the get-go, but it becomes important that she's cast as the virgin. So just the constant sort of pushing against the stereotypes. And again, like you're saying with Marty, he's pretty smart. He is a fool because he's getting stoned, but also he thinks he's going on a weekend holiday away. So why not? I love his little bong contraption that turns into
it's so
travel
mad.
cup.
And then he whacks one of the zombies with it as well. But it's just, again, just like, why? Why is that there? It's obviously just a little fun bit of prop design. They were like, oh, wouldn't it be funny if he had like a little coffee cup that turned into a massive bong?
Yeah, of course. It's just kind of the comedy elements.
I reckon someone must be selling those. I guarantee there'll be something online where you can buy one of those.
Yep, I'm sure you can. There's something quite repulsive about the idea of bong water being in a drinking receptacle, and how disastrously wrong that could go for somebody. But yeah, I'm sure you can buy that.
Lovely. Oh, one of the other moments that stuck out for me was the way they'd turned Jules into this kind of like dumb blonde character again, but then suddenly hypersexualized her all of a sudden out of nowhere. But they did it in this kind of ridiculous way to start off with, where she's tongue kissing the head of a dead wolf that's mounted on one of the walls. Like, it was just such a what's happening here? This is weird. But I like that because again, it's satirizing it. It's like they'll have a moment where there's some sort of sexy dance or sexy thing going on, and all the guys will be like, And
She absolutely goes for it as well.
She really does.
Fair play to her.
And I think the casting of Chris Hemsworth again was great because he looks like he could be that jock character, but then also he plays it in a different way at the start. So it's that sort of switch into jock mode and punching stuff and running around being that archetype.
It's harder with Chris Hemsworth, isn't it? And I guess maybe not when he was cast and when they were shooting the film, but by the time it comes out, it's a little bit harder to, it doesn't quite work as well because he is Thor by that point. And you just see Thor, really. He's a good actor, isn't he? He's one of those actors that I'm interested to see what his post-Marvel career will look like because he's done some really interesting stuff with the character of Thor. He's one of the best bits of the MCU at times, so it'd be interesting to see what he does post Thor. Just back on the scene with Jules getting off with the wolf. The thing that I was thinking throughout that was, I wonder what the wolf head is made of, because I follow a guy on Instagram who's like a movie prop master or something like that, and he just does little short videos of like, here's how you would make this thing if you need it. Like the most recent one I saw him do was like, if a character needs to eat chalk, here's what we make it out of, and it was like, it wasn't like icing, but it was something a bit similar to that, just some edible white stuff that you can roll up and it becomes firm. He just does videos like that, and it made me wonder, like, what would he have made the wolf's head out of? Because it's gross. It's not a real taxidermy wolf head. Like, what's the nicest thing for the actress to?
Tunkies.
Yeah, basically, but also it needs to stay solid and not, so it can't be edible. Maybe it might fall apart. I don't know, but yeah, it made me wonder that. Yeah,
again, I love all that kind of, when you look into those bits of it and how they put those together. Like going back to the merman again. The moment when the merman has the bloody blowhole and you see the blood splurt out of the blowhole. It's like little moments like that it's kind of add that kind of comedy to it as well, because Jules kissing the wolf, that's a funny moment. It's subverting what you would expect in your average horror film. And having the merman pop up after they've kind of queued him up throughout the entire film, and having the irony of that character being killed by him, I think it's, again, they're just playing with it in such a beautiful way, all of these kind of expectations you have when you watch this kind of film, and really having fun with those elements. I think it's great.
Yeah, I mean, it's got a tremendous sense of fun and knowing filmmaking stuff in it that add to that fun, and, are the basics really, aren't they?
I know I talked about Altered States when we talked about Ghostbusters. Going back to that episode again, not to sound like a broken record, but this one feels like the other film we looked at during that podcast episode. It felt a bit like that experiment because it's a big experiment. It's like the surveillance elements of it, and it goes out of control. These kind of like controlled situations that they try and do in science is like, again, another sort of mad science element, trying to control the environment in an experiment, and how that can go wrong when things get out of hand or things don't go the way that you had planned. I think that's an interesting way to look at this again in that kind of experimental world.
Yeah. Because like having a controlled experiment is the right thing to do. Scientific experiments should have controls. But I think in the sort of narrative sense, the hubris of the mad science is when either the madness of your science outweighs the controls that you have in place, or you just haven't put enough controls in, but your mad scientist brain doesn't recognize that, and you want to push further with the madness. I guess they're not really. That's what happens in Das Experiment. They're pushing too hard, aren't they? And not putting appropriate controls in place. There's not really the pushing in The Cabin in the Woods. It's just that through the events of the film, we learn that the controls aren't enough. And they've had warning the controls aren't enough because of Sweden and watching what happens in Kyoto. That the controls are not working elsewhere and things are failing. But I guess the hubris is just, well, hey, that's them. We're American. We know what we're doing. And it's not going to happen here.
Yeah.
We're the good scientists.
Yeah, we've got to prove ourselves right and win again. Again, because that comes into the sort of corporate mentality of it. It's like, we always get the job done. We're the best.
Yeah.
Japan's the rivals. But look.
And the rivalry between the teams within the lab as well, sort of, this dismissive, they're very dismissive to Amy Acker because she works in chemicals, you know what you're doing, and there's maintenance, treated as if they're idiots. Is it maintenance, one of them that always bets on the same thing, every time, because that's what they do, because they're maintenance, like there's that kind of snobbery both within the American lab and also clearly how they think of the other nations' labs as well.
How do you think you would have dealt with being in the cabin in the woods in this experiment, and what do you think you might have picked?
What were the options? We saw the box that's going to bring out the Cenobites, and we saw the diary, obviously, that brings out the family. The conch shell. I mean, I wouldn't be going in the basement, but then they might spray me with the cognition impairing pheromones or whatever.
Yeah. Which stereotype would you think you would have fallen into?
I mean, you always think you're going to be the jock, but in reality, you're going to be the fool.
Every time, I'm going to be the fool. Yeah, I feel the same way. I think that's what would happen. I think there was like a weird puppet that looked like the like Zoltan from Big. Is it Zoltan?
Yeah, the
fortune telling thing
that he does the wish.
Yeah. I think I would gravitate towards that because it looked like the biggest thing down there. I mean, the film reel as well. I wonder what the film reel led to.
Ooh, yes.
Yeah, lots of.
Yeah, that probably would have drawn me in as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's too much to choose from, and also there's too many different horror tropes going on. I mean, it was nice to see Sigourney Weaver pop up at the end as well. Like, this is two films we're covering today with the excellent Sigourney Weaver in. I think she was great as the director and sort of giving that little monologue at the end, sort of wrapping things up with that. I thought that was like a nice little added extra.
Yeah, she's great fun in this.
Yeah, and I think she had a lot of fun playing around with a werewolf as well. Again, she's clearly obsessed with dogs and werewolves and things like that.
Yeah, there's a theme.
Yeah, she's got a little obsession. But I think revisiting this as well, I think it still holds up for me, because Cabin in the Woods, I remember when I first watched it, I was like, is it going to work as well the second time I watch it and on repeat viewings? Because once you know that twist, does it take away from it? I mean, for me, I like seeing all the different tropes, and I think the more we talk about film, the more I sort of look into film and discuss it regularly on the podcast, the more I can appreciate the different elements of this and just like how much of a love letter it is to all of that kind of stuff. And I watched a making of documentary. You can find it on YouTube. It's just a few bits about how they put this together. And you can see how happy Drew Goddard is to be making this. There's the scene with the lifts, when all the lifts open up, and you can see sort of what it looked like. I think they used gallons and gallons of blood to deck the walls. And he's just going around like, yeah, zombies, can you look at this way? And you have to do this. And then he's like, we need more guts. I want like enough guts to be a hippopotamus belly. So he's like going around picking up all these things, trying to make a little mound in the corner. And just like, they're having a lot of fun making this. I think it was obviously quite a tough one because I had to do it so quickly. But I think when you see something like that, it adds to your enjoyment of the film.
It's true of both films. It's true of this and Ghostbusters as well. There's just a tremendous love of the subject matter and a tremendous sense of joy and fun in what they're making. That I think, I mean, in the case of Ghostbusters, it's led to an enormous like media franchise because of that magic. And then it didn't with Cabin in the Woods, but it's still, you know, I think it's a sort of well-liked niche film. Well, not that niche, but you know what I mean.
How did you feel watching this again? Did it hold up for you?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think it's really good. What I noticed was, you know, it's not good horror. That like, there's nothing scary in the film because it's dissecting horror, and it's got this very critical lens, I suppose, on it. So it doesn't make for a good horror movie, but it's funny and fun, and you know, a good little mad science lab down there.
Yeah, I loved all those elements of it and had a really good time watching both of these films. So thank you very much for joining us for this episode of Journey Through Sci-Fi. Remember, if you want to hear more episodes as soon as they drop onto the feed, make sure you subscribe to the podcast.
Come and follow us on social media, search for Journey Through Sci-Fi and we will turn up, or you can visit our website, journeythroughsci-fi.com, for more.
We have also started a Reddit. We've got a little subreddit, so come and find us over there. We're at Through Sci-Fi if you want to come and chat. We're still debating whether to do one of those Discord channels. If people want that, we can do that. We're still learning these things, listeners. So yeah, let us know how to manage those. But if you do want just a free and easy way to support the podcast, you can always leave us a lovely review. It's quick, it's easy, and it helps new listeners discover the show.
If you'd like to listen to more Journey Through Sci-Fi bonus content, you can come to patreon.com/Journey Through Sci-Fi and sign up there.
And we'll be back here on the main feed very soon. Matt, what are we looking at in next time's episode?
We are returning to the evergreen mad science story of Frankenstein with some modern reinterpretations of the Frankenstein story, reimaginings, with Reanimator from 1985 and Poor Things from 2024.
Oh, so we're keeping it a little bit spooky, which is quite apt with it being October and being spooky season. So it's a good couple of main feed episodes for you listeners.
So join us for those. We'll be back soon. That's all for today.
Bye.